You just scrolled past a funeral. Maybe it was a stranger's obituary. Maybe it was a photo of flowers on a casket. You felt something. A small tug in your chest, then you kept scrolling. That reaction feels automatic, ordinary, human. But the real answer is far stranger. That tug in your chest is not a modern habit. It is not something your culture taught you last year or even last century. It is a signal running through a circuit that is at least 100,000 years old, before language had fully formed, before agriculture, before cities. Your ancestors were already doing something no other animal on Earth was doing in the same way. They were burying their dead on purpose. Think about that for a moment. A group of early humans, exhausted, hungry, constantly moving to survive, still stopped. They dug into the earth. They placed a body inside. Sometimes they added flowers, tools, or ochre, a red pigment ground from stone. Why would a species fighting for survival every single day spend precious time and energy on someone who could no longer help them hunt, gather, or fight? That question sat unanswered for a long time. Then evidence started to surface. At a site called Qafzeh Cave in what is now Israel, archaeologists found human remains dating back roughly 100,000 years, deliberately placed in graves. One skeleton was found with deer antlers positioned against its chest. That is not an accident. That is intention. Around the same period at Skhul Cave, researchers uncovered similarly deliberate burials, some accompanied by animal bones and red ochre. Ochre shows up again and again at these sites. Scientists still debate exactly why. Some believe it symbolized blood or life or protection in a world beyond death. Others believe it marked status. Either way, it tells you something important. These were not just bodies being discarded, these were bodies being treated with meaning. Here is where it gets stranger. Homo sapiens were not the only ones doing this. Deep in a cave system in South Africa called Rising Star, researchers led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger uncovered the remains of a species called Homo naledi. This species had a brain roughly one-third the size of yours. Its body was small, its features primitive in many ways, and yet its remains were found deep inside an almost inaccessible cave chamber, arranged in a pattern that strongly suggests deliberate placement. A brain a third the size of yours, still capable of ritual. That single fact rewrites the story you may have grown up believing. The idea that only modern, advanced humans developed the emotional depth to mourn. The evidence increasingly suggests something different. Grief and the impulse to mark death with meaning may be older and more widespread across the human family tree than anyone expected. So why would evolution favor this behavior at all? Grief costs energy. Burial costs time. From a purely survival-driven perspective, none of it makes sense. Unless the behavior itself was the survival strategy. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies, including work by researcher Paul Pettit at Durham University, have proposed that early death rituals served a critical social function. They were not just about the person who died. They were about the group that remained. A funeral, even a simple one, forces a community to stop, gather, and reaffirm its bonds. It reminds every surviving member who they belong to. It transforms an individual's death into a moment of collective identity. Grief, in other words, may have been one of the earliest forms of social glue. There is something else buried inside these ancient graves, literally and figuratively. The objects, a necklace made of shells, a stone tool placed beside a hand, a splash of red ochre across a skull. These are not random additions. Anthropologist Paul Mellers has argued that symbolic burial goods represent one of the clearest markers of what we now call behavioral modernity, the moment when early humans began thinking not just about the present, but about meaning, memory, and possibly an afterlife. Your ancestors were asking questions you still ask today. What happens after this? Does anything of a person remain? Does love, or memory, or identity survive the body that carried it? Nobody knows if they believed in something like heaven. Nobody knows if they imagined spirits or ancestors watching over them, or nothing at all. But the fact that they acted as though it mattered tells you everything about how deeply death shaped early human thought. Now bring this back to you. When you attend a funeral today, you follow a structure that would feel oddly familiar to someone standing at a grave 100,000 years ago. People gather. Someone speaks. Objects are placed with the body, flowers, photographs, sometimes a favorite item. Silence is observed. Tears are allowed, even expected. None of that is arbitrary. It is inherited behavior, carried forward across thousands of generations, refined by countless cultures, but rooted in the same ancient impulse. Stop. Mark this. Do not let this person disappear without meaning. Even the discomfort you feel scrolling past a stranger's obituary online is part of that same inheritance. Your brain, wired by hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors who paused for death, does not know the difference between a screen and a graveside. It reacts the same ancient way, a small alarm, a moment of recognition. This mattered, this still matters. Modern psychologists studying grief, including work built on the foundations laid by researcher Colin Murray Parkes, describe mourning as an attachment process. Not simply sadness, but the brain's attempt to update its understanding of the world after losing someone it was bonded to. That process, that need to update, to make sense, to ritualize loss, did not begin with modern religion or modern therapy. It began in caves, with ochre-stained hands, with deer antlers placed gently against a chest. You are not more evolved than the impulse to grieve. You are the impulse to grieve, continued. Every time you attend a funeral, light a candle, visit a grave, or even pause at a stranger's obituary online, you are performing a ritual older than written history, older than agriculture, older, quite possibly, than your own species. So the next time that small tug appears in your chest, do not brush it aside as sentimentality. It is not new. It is not weak. It is not modern. It is one of the oldest things about being human. You did not scroll past a funeral. You touched something 100,000 years old.